Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I am your host, Chris Moody. Today on the OnBase podcast, we are thrilled to have Chad Sollis with us today to discuss breaking barriers to digital accessibility. Chad, thanks for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris, for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, well, I'm excited too. I mean, the question we always love to start with, you have an awesome background. We were just looking at our mutual connections before we hit the record button, but could you tell everyone a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, you bet. I have been in the digital marketing and high tech space for 20 years, almost 24 years. I started as a graphic designer, which led to leading a creative team, which led to teaching myself how to code, and then into marketing and marketing operations, then marketing programs, which ultimately led me to product for a few years, and then in engineering, and then back to marketing. I've had the opportunity to do that for companies, usually during high growth stages, 30 million, 40 million in revenue, and seeing those companies go to 100 million, 200 million, and in some cases, $3 billion of revenue. So it's been a wild ride.
That's awesome. I love that. I refer to myself as a mediocre graphic and web designer, but that's actually where I started too. So my first marketing gigs were helping folks with web design and graphic design, but that was with Dreamweaver, Fireworks, even started with Angel Fire back in the day.
I remember all of them. Yeah, I pivoted I taught myself to code at that stage because I realized there were people that were much more artistically talented than I was as a graphic designer.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I did some awesome MySpace pages back in the day, but yeah, well, if we jump into breaking barriers to digital accessibility, the first thing I'd love to know is why should digital accessibility be a strategic priority for senior leaders, and how does that directly impact brand growth and loyalty?
Yeah, so let's start with the easy one. The easy part of that is there's a compliance and legality issue. It is required for websites to be accessible to those with disabilities. So, from a senior leader perspective, there's both brand reputation as well as costs. Litigation costs and lawsuits can be very expensive. But that's not like, the compelling or really positive purpose behind it. The 1 in 4 Americans are experience some kind of disability. That group holds $20 billion of buying power. What's even more important with that group is when they find companies that do create accessible experiences and that do have them as individuals in mind, they're extremely loyal. They come back, they repurchase, they tell their friends, they tell their family, and then those people are also loyal to those brands for the same reasons. So there's a tremendous buying power behind that audience. And that, to me, is really the reason senior leaders should be paying attention to it.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm glad you hit on the first part, right? It's not like this is an optional thing that we should do, but further embracing accessibility is certainly an opportunity for us to build stronger brands. So I think you handled that really well. We ran into that in our rebrand too. We were actually asking for opinions on certain things, and several folks that we work with internally said, well, I'm colorblind, but here are some of the things that I notice when we're comparing these two things, which led to awesome conversations in addition to the tools we use to test, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I tell you, if you just, you take your web team or your optimization team and you run them through observing someone experiencing their website with a screen reader or a puff device or, any kind of assisted device, it'll change your whole lens on how people are experiencing your brand. And this is particularly important for companies that like are in e-commerce, or if they're in a highly regulated space like financial services or healthcare, they're going to have a much more likely chance of having someone with disability experiencing their website. And yeah, it's an incredible opportunity to personalize and experience and gain loyalty.
Well, Chad, I think you and I have both seen a lot of conversation around SEO lately. We've seen the HubSpot conversation popping up on LinkedIn and how traffic has dipped for their SEO, but we know that accessibility plays a big part in how we rank in search engines. So what are some of the best practices and how does that increase the reach we have to our audience?
Yeah, there are, with SEO, there are some core principles that, if applied correctly, even with changes in an algorithm, you will generally yield positive results. These are things you and I have seen in our 20-year careers, like good site structure, good navigation, keyword density, things like that. With accessibility, it almost becomes a natural occurrence or a forcing function where accessibility enforces the use of good header tags, for example. So H1 tags are used at the top of the page. H2 tags are used as subheaders in the page, H3 and so forth. Good alt text in images. Tab order, like if you're tabbing your navigation. All of those things actually are really, what they do is help Google and other search engines crawl and find information on your site. And then the alt tags and anchor text and your title tags within the anchor text, those kinds of things actually just help with good keyword density and usage. And then if you're really doing accessibility right, which is not like keyword stuffing and doing things like that, you're actually describing an image that would be useful to an end user, that actually becomes more relevant. And now, as Google evolves, it's always towards relevance. And so good accessibility means extra relevance as well for both your visitor and the search engines that are crawling your website.
Awesome. What are some of the challenges that get in the way of great accessibility efforts, and how do you think folks should overcome those?
Man, that's a good question. I hate to say it, but ultimately laziness is what gets in the way. Or you may, I've been a marketer and I've been a tactical. I built the websites and done the design work, and so I've been on the tactical end of that as well. And sometimes it's just time, right? You have a deadline, you got to get through it. You throw things up, you forget the alt text, or with CSS, you're like, I don't care if this is an H3 tag, I'm going to style it to be an H1 tag, and I'm going to be done with this. And it's just speed, and it's not thinking about it. But if you put it into part of your practice, like you would QA, you have people just including it in the cycle. It's a checkbox in your process before deployment. It becomes a real natural occurrence. So like on our team, obviously we're an accessibility company. We have our creative team is very well familiar with accessibility best practices, so they design towards that. Our front-end engineer is very familiar with how those things work, and so he's built them all into the React components that ultimately build our website. And so it's part of the DNA of the team. And now that it's there, it actually doesn't slow us down at all. We just crank, but we had to be deliberate about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I used to have a slide build. This is a different context, but it led to the only barrier to information is laziness. And that if we make a bad decision today, it's our fault. There's enough information out there, right? So I think this is a classic case of, are we prioritizing the right things? And to your point, I mean, the buying power that's created with that loyalty, I'd love to hear some of your favorite brands that are doing an amazing job with how they think about accessibility and how that's building that trust and loyalty. And we're going to connect this to hats once we stop recording, right? You and I are both hat guys. We'll talk about which hats we buy, but we do know that marketers love brands. We all love brands. People who make us feel a great way will get our money. So who stands out with accessibility?
Yeah. So, we're here I'm based in Utah. We have a big Utah office with AudioEye, and one that stands out for us is a company called Explore Utah Valley, and it's a tourism site. And they had been receiving lots of feedback, as you can imagine, with travel and hospitality. We're going to fall right into that. 1 in 4 Americans with disabilities are trying to experience that. And had been receiving a lot of feedback, and it was actually hindering tourism for the area. So they dug in, they learned what they needed to learn with accessibility. Engaged, they engaged us for technology and professional services to help them accomplish that. And as you can imagine with tourism, visualizations were really important. Imagery was really important. Also searching and navigation was important. And they went through this whole transformation on their website to improve all of those components. And they found almost an immediate increase in tourism through that. They found an immediate increase in traffic to the website from SEO. SEO immediately improved. And all of these things combined ultimately led to better personalized experience for not just the community with disabilities that was coming to visit their website, but honestly for all visitors, because these practices actually help all visitors as well. And so they saw an immediate lift.
Yeah, well, immediate lift. I didn't mean to cut you off there. I love that because I was already running to when we talked about prioritization, and I don't want this to be something that any of us treat as an afterthought. What are some of the best strategies you've seen across marketing, web, product teams to make sure that accessibility is at the forefront of the conversation and not something that, oh, let's go check these things and make sure the stuff we already love and have agreed upon works for everyone?
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of ideas here. And it's going to range based on a company's resources, their budget. But I think the first thing people can do is, just educate their teams on the basic principles. I mean, you can go a long way with just alt tags, good use of header tags, good navigation. And that's going to get you, it's not going to get you all the way there, but it's going to get you a good step forward. But I would incorporate those best practices. Once you've trained the team, they become aware of what to look for. Incorporate it into your design. So when your designers are doing Figma, and you're working through experiences, actually design ahead of time with accessibility in mind. And that's color, contrast, size, things like that. Then when it comes to development, almost all websites today are dynamic. I mean, I guess there's your WordPress crowd still, but build into your components, into your development process, accessibility built in. Make it required. Make it part of your software development lifecycle with checks and balances in that piece. Those things aren't super expensive and can just be part of your streamlined process. And then have it part of your QA process. Those three things. And then, if you don't have resources to do that on your team, or you outsource a lot of things, find a good partner that can help you with that. When you find a partner, I would, strongly encourage you not to look at companies that tell you they can solve all the world's problems with technology. Accessibility is one of those complex things that context is important, and technology can't solve that by itself. Automation can only solve 40 to 50% of the accessibility problem, which requires human-assisted technology to get you the final, that final 50%. And so as you think about those, I just look at where are you at in your journey as far as, I'm a small team. I got 3 people. I got them going 60 hours a week. They're not going to have time to do this. Well, then find a good partner. They can help you with it, and they can build into your development processes. And that works on the product side too. If you want to go the extra mile, um, let's go to like a product team. Most product teams are going to use technologies like usertesting.com or similar to test, out in the field. Uh, Find groups that test with people with disabilities, or put that as a requirement. And they'll get you feedback in that process to help you think through things a little differently. But at the end of the day, it's really just think of accessibility as you would personalization, because most marketers, most product people are thinking about personalization already. Problem is they're thinking about it in behavior, or they're thinking about it in demographic or firmographic context. And this particular context is very human oriented, and it's actually how they behave on the website, and could be up to 25% of your audience. So just think of it as personalization, and you'll actually take yourself down the right path.
Great stuff there. You mentioned human assisted, human oriented, and before, I know that you said 1 in 4 of, all humans have some form of a disability. So I'd love to understand how you think human stories and feedback can shape impactful accessibility initiatives.
Yeah. So in our category, and in the disabled community, there's a something often quoted said, "Nothing for us without us," meaning you can't create experiences that are for this group of people. And I'd argue this is not limited to people with disabilities, without including those individuals in the story or in the evaluation. And I think simply just involving people in your process will get you to the outcomes that will ultimately yield you the best experiences. I work, at a company called Traeger. Depending on where you're at in the United States, you will know that brand and be very passionate about it. You may even have the Traeger mountains tattooed on your body. That's how passionate some of those folks are. But I led product over there. That was my little stint into product for a while. And I had this great vision for what that digital product was going to be. And it was a killer idea. I'm not going to lie. It was awesome. But what we found, so part of our process, we would fly all over the United States. We would sit with people of varying demographics, and, economic standards and all of those pieces, and different geographies. We'd sit with them in their own kitchens with their own guests, and we would cook a meal with them. And we'd watch how they would cook. We'd watch how they would interface with our grill and with the app, and then how they would experience it, the rest of the meal with the people there. And what we found was, it doesn't matter how great the idea was, every time when you got down to the experience with the individuals, they did something different than you would expect. And that was okay, because what happened is we visited, 30 or 40 different families, came back, and we reshaped our strategy based on what we experienced with those human beings. And I think the same principle applies with websites. If we're talking to our prospects, our customers more often, if we get people of all walks of life involved in our testing, optimization, our persona development, and we actually talk to those people, I think we'll find that we'll create much more relevant experiences.
That's such a great story. The dinner table is a pretty special time for many folks too, especially with their guests. So the fact that you were able to observe that, I love that. I came up through product management too, and it made me think about one of the early startups I worked at that was helping people in wheelchairs, and we would have weeks where every single person in the office had to be in a wheelchair the whole time, and see what it's really like to try to get around some of the corners and to things that you aren't going to notice if you're filling out a marketing brochure of all the benefits and things that it's going to help you with, until you're like, what? Hey, if we don't make this a little more flexible with how we're getting to point B or C, There's
Yeah.
no substitute for that and talking to folks. I love that. As we shift towards some of the faster questions, I like to call it lightning round. There's one more
Okay.
that I want to hit on because we wouldn't be in marketing if we didn't say ROI on a
Right.
podcast, right? Like we have
Right.
to say ROI. How should organizations measure the return on investment of their accessibility initiatives, both in terms of compliance and even the broader brand impact?
Yeah, you bet. I'm so happy you said ROI instead of ROAS, because
Yeah.
that was always a little pet peeve of mine when in my Omniture days. Uh, hated the ROAS acronym, but ROI always felt right.
Yeah, we can hit cause and correlation too if you want to go
Right.
there.
But so yeah, there's a couple of ways. First and foremost, and again, I always start with this because if you don't do it for the right reasons, at least do it for the wrong reasons. Which is there's a component, there's protection and compliance, and there's just an opportunity cost of lawsuits, litigation, lawyers. Yeah, sure, you can save money there. That's not why you should do it, but you've waited too long if that's a problem. Now, from a ROI perspective, there's a couple of pieces. If you look at how you do it and how you accomplish this, if it's with a partner or on your own, with a partner, you would measure ROI by, okay, if I use a partner, I'm going to have a cost. There's going to be a pro serve cost. There's going to be a software cost. On the other side of the equation, if you do it yourself, you're going to have engineer costs, design costs, things like that. And I should go back on the first one. The average litigation for accessibility is around $50K, and that's per incident. And you might get 3, 4, 5 incidents depending on what you do. The real ROI from accessibility comes from the increased business you get through personalization for people with disabilities. And you'll hear me keep leaning in on the personalization piece because that's a very common piece that marketers are already thinking about and the product people are already thinking about. And sometimes, like I remember, again, back in my Adobe days, in our testing, we would see increases of anywhere from 50%, and some of our tests went up as high as 2,000% improvement in leads, and we would measure all the way to close business. And so we could tell you, hey, this webinar created a 30% lift in average selling price and ARR and, all those things. Well, personalization to those with disabilities is no different. There's an incredible opportunity because they will come back and purchase with you more often than the average person. They will share with their friends. They will share with their family. And all of a sudden you have this like really loyal audience. And if you look at I'll just say layup brands like Amazon, or Nike, or, you understand the power of loyalty because people will come back and they don't even look at price anymore. They're just like, I like you for whatever reason. In this case, it's going to be because you listened to me and I'm going to buy from you every chance I get. That's where the real ROI comes from with accessibility.
Great stuff. All right, we're going to shift into the lightning round, Chad. These are quick hitters. You don't have to give us a huge reason unless you just want to expand on anything. But the first question, what's the biggest challenge in B2B marketing? You can only pick one.
Yeah. I'm going to go with creating engaging content. And the reason for me with that is if you're active on LinkedIn at all as a B2B marketer, you've run into folks like Chris Walker and some others that have been talking about how the funnel has shifted pretty dramatically to the top end of the funnel, where people are researching and looking. They're not even looking for you anymore. They're actually just going about life, and you have to interrupt their life with something meaningful and engaging that will ultimately tease them out in your category. And the way that's done is with content and video. So I think specifically video content. but again, it's also written content. And if you're not winning at content, your competition, you will lose to your competition.
Good stuff. Yeah, content's back. I've never really left, right? But I do think in marketing we go
It's
in
not just for
waves.
SEO anymore now, though.
Oh yeah. I mean, you go back to 2010, that was the quantity versus quality debates that we were having, and then everyone forgets about content for a while because there's some new trend to chase, and now we're back.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think like Sixth Sense last buyer journey report showed that like 82% of the buying decision was made before they even came to your website. So the only way you have an inkling of hope is to have content that they saw before that.
totally. All right, Tech Rex, what tools or technology would you recommend to our listeners?
Yeah. So I'm gonna get on a soapbox just for a minute, and I would say first marketers should focus less on tech. They should focus on their audience, strategy, and content. Now, that said, you need delivery mechanisms and you need tools to help create personalization. So I'll step off my soapbox, answer your question. Headless content for me is one of the biggest ones. Headless content management. So I'm a big fan of a company called Storyblok. Some that you might recognize are like we used Amplience, which at Traeger, and there's quite a few. My favorite Storyblok. And then I would pick a personalization platform. So my current favorite on the personalization side is Mutiny. They've been pretty powerful for us, and we've yielded some really fantastic results.
Awesome. All right, good reads. Is there a book, blog, newsletter, or podcast that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, so I'm a little old school in this category. My favorite book, I recommend it to every person, leader or not. Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. I think, man, the more accountable people become, the better results come, and great principles there. The second one, also an oldie, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Turns out when you learn to have empathy for people, and you learn to like really focus on people, it ultimately benefits your life and their life, and we're kind of both lifted together. So those would be my two.
Yeah, love that. I have that on my bookshelf, and it's true. I did a lot of research on this. I tried to build a relationship app way back in the day. We had a cool product. We actually had folks trying to invest. I just wasn't willing to quit my job, right? But one of the studies was it's scientifically proven that it does make you happier to help someone else. It makes you even happier than the person you're helping. So to your point, I mean, I think that's so true. And I'm a huge advocate for radical candor. So the more we can be our whole selves at work, I think you can build that contagious effect, which is really,
I think so,
indispensable, right? I mean, that's something every company wants.
absolutely.
Sweet. Okay, good people. Who inspires you in the B2B space that you think we should try to bring on the show?
Yeah, you know what? Thinking about this, not all the great builders are, what I would call LinkedIn all-stars that, take have high following count and are people that have a loud voice. That and those people are great. But some of the builders I've engaged with over the last 20 plus years, they're just heads down building businesses. Scott Harris is one from Box.com. He was an old Omniture and Adobe partner of mine, and just out of this world good. Good human and knows his craft really well. Nick Rico with Lucid Software, also a total stud. He actually came up through finance and was my finance partner in the old Omniture days. And his career through a series of great experiences. He now leads a growth team for Lucid Software. one of the darlings of, the Utah tech scene. And then I would, plug my own team a little bit. Manuel Reach. He leads my revenue marketing team, but he has grown companies like Pluralsight, InsideSales.com, and he's helping us do a killer job at AudioEye. So that would be probably the three people I would recommend.
Love it. Awesome stuff. And then the most important question of all, Chad, how can everyone get in touch with you after the show?
Yeah. So, I'm one of those builders that are just heads down. So I'm not like active. I can't give you a social handle or anything, but you hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm very responsive. So find me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to chat, set up time with you, or go grab a coffee.
Outstanding. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the show. It was a great episode.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chris. I had a great time.
Me too. Thanks.